everybody. Welcome to the first Sportico and Sports Innovation Lab Ask Me Anything. It's going to be a great conversation for the next 45 minutes, and you can participate in it by asking your questions in the question box. But before we get started, I just want to say hello. My name is Josh Walker. I am the co-founder of the Sports Innovation Lab, handle all of our research here and focus on the future of sports and innovation. We were approached by Sportico a while ago, and Scott in particular, to do something really innovative, and that's to be a lot more focused on the business of sport and innovation and technology. And these guys are covering the market better than anybody else at this point. So we wanted to make sure that we were aligned with them on what they were doing. Scott, you want to say hello?
Yeah, I just want to say, Josh, we are so pleased to be working with the Sports Innovation Lab, and Angela and I have been talking about the sports industry and how there's a better way to cover it for at least 3 or 4 years. So the chance to finally join up and link up and have these discussions, a higher level discussion on sports business, I am just thrilled to be here, and we're looking forward to the entire series.
Yeah, I am psyched to be doing this with you, and I couldn't be more thrilled to kick it off with one of my favorite athletes of all time, and that's not just throwing sunshine at you, Grant. You definitely were a very big part of my childhood, but now more so you're part of my professional career because we follow you, the Hawks, a lot of the things that you're doing very closely. You're involved in 2K. We can cover some of that. You're executive producer of some films. We can cover that, and it's great to have you here because we're trying to have a much smarter conversation about the future of sports, and you're plugged into a lot of areas that matter to our customers and to fans out there. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Josh and Scott for having me. And Josh, I know I have some gray in my beard, much like Scott. But you, when you said it brings back great memories from your childhood, that made me feel slightly older than what I am.
Well, unfortunately, I think the color of my hair indicates that we're probably not that far apart. But I do appreciate you winning a few Final Fours for me. So listen, let's kick it off by really talking about something that I know is near and dear to your heart, which is the NBA. Not only are you an all-star, obviously, but you're an owner now. You're in a very elite group of former players that have ownership stakes in teams. Tell me a little bit about your decision to participate in that group and how you approach innovating what the NBA has really done a phenomenal job of, which is creating a lot of different touch points for fans to interact with their brand. You were quoted at one point saying that, the NBA is a phenomenal global PR firm masquerading as a league. Tell me more about how you approach being an owner and how you kind of collaborate with other owners and league management.
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. I think the idea or the thought of ownership in professional sports and in the NBA really for me started, with my father, who, unsuccessfully tried 3 different times back in the 80s with the New England Patriots, with the Washington Bullets and Capitals back in the early 90s, and then with the Cleveland Browns expansion when they left to go to Baltimore and the NFL awarded them a franchise. He was a part of those groups. And so hearing about, and being there, living at home, in the 80s, being in school in the 90s, and then being a professional athlete myself later on in the late 90s, to sort of see him go through that experience and to learn from that, it really, I think, planted a seed at that point in time, even before I was in the NBA and in professional sports, that the idea of ownership, of being a part of an ownership group, was something that was attainable and something that was real. And so I wasn't, I never was quite sure how it would happen or when it would happen. And certainly I'm grateful that 2 years removed from playing, that we were able to, to acquire the Atlanta Hawks in 2015. But that was always on the radar. And that was always something that I was cognizant of, always something that I aspired to do. I think with the exception of one owner, the last owner I played for in Los Angeles with the Clippers, I was very close with each one of them and spent, a considerable amount of time learning from them, learning their core business, learning what it takes to, to run a team, to operate a team, trying to understand, all the incredible decisions that go into that. And so whether it was Bill Davidson in Detroit, the late Bill Davidson, the late Rich DeVos here in Orlando, or Robert Sarver in Phoenix, I had a unique relationship, sort of just, like I said, eyeballing this thought one day, somehow, some way. And so, like I said, we were able to buy the Atlanta Hawks in 2015, and it's been just an incredible journey. Tony Ressler, who is my friend and certainly a great partner with the Hawks, and we had a chance to come in and really kind of add value. And I think it was a franchise that was in a tremendous market, a very diverse city, an international airport, a vibrant community.
And you're doing things differently. I mean, you were one of the first to have a diversity and inclusion officer. You're definitely part of a 2K league that's emerging for the NBA. How active do you stay involved in some of those business decisions? I mean, the business model's changing, right? Scott's reporting on it pretty much every day. There's some breaking news about SPAC money coming into the industry, changing the way that ownership structures are created. Private equities like sneaking around the corner at every chance they can. How active are you in sort of reimagining what ownership looks like for the Hawks?
Well, you're right. I mean, it is evolving and changing. And it's almost, sort of consistent with technology overall, where, Moore's Law, where it's rapidly accelerating. And I think that, that applies in professional sports. And so I think because of our history and our past and maybe some of the challenges we've had in Atlanta, we've had to think outside the box. We've had to be innovative and creative. We have a great CEO, Steve Koonin, who is, sort of a marketing expert, certainly knows that market and demographic. But, our responsibility as owner, I mean, yeah, we're engaged, we're involved, we provide strategic direction, resources, we empower. But yeah, I mean, understanding, what Atlanta is, and Atlanta's diverse, Atlanta's young, we have a large millennial, customer fan base, season ticket base, if you will. We have to think, we had a tender night, I mean, and I don't know if I'm proud of that or not, but
and I'm too old to understand why that would be fun, but
yeah, and I am too. But I think it just sort of speaks to us not being scared to try things and having the engagement with our audience, with our customers. We recently reimagined our arena a couple of years ago, and really the thought and the level and the detail that went into making it a fun event, making it an experience. We are in an experience economy, and we are constantly competing with Amazon and Netflix, and what can we do to get people off their computers and into our building to experience games, experience concerts, experience I like to say that food, music, and sports are universal languages. And
yeah, Grant, you want them off the computers, but on their smaller computers while sitting in your arena. I don't want to just gloss over Steve Koonin, though, because I think that innovation in the years he spent at Coca-Cola in a consumer business, he understands how to reach the audience. And even before COVID, it was Steve who suggested that perhaps it would be better for the NBA to start its season on Christmas, not earlier. And yet here we are, that idea out of necessity seems to be gaining some momentum.
Quite prophetic from Steve on that front. But yeah, Steve Koonin is really a marketing genius. And I don't know if people understand or he gets enough credit, but Sprite, Coca-Cola, his relationship. I mean, he really kind of, in a lot of ways, reinvented sort of sports marketing in that sense. And, I had a relationship with Sprite back in the early 90s. And so I used to call him back then Boss Man, and, kind of jokingly, and I still sometimes do. But, he was able to create this brand and give it relevancy, give it life, connect with that sort of young Generation X back in the 90s. And so he understands how to connect and resonate with an audience. And so when he came in 2014 and we joined and bought the team in 2015, it's been just tremendous to reconnect with him and to work with him. And like I said, the innovation and understanding your market, thinking outside the box, not being afraid to try new things. Obviously at a sports forum a year ago, he talked about the idea of starting later so you're not sort of overlapping with football, which, creates some challenges in terms of, as they all say in the NBA, the NBA really doesn't start until football ends. And so I think being fearless in that way and not being afraid to make mistakes, not being afraid to try new things, that's the world we're in. And there's, like I said, there's so much competing for our entertainment dollars that you have to be willing to sort of, to try new things. And so I love his creativity. I mean, even coming off the heels of this summer with all that happened with George Floyd, and certainly the protests and the passion that was exhibited all over the country, all over the world, it was his idea to use our State Farm Arena as a polling center. And sort of, like I said, thinking, okay, how can we make a difference? How can we serve our community, particularly in lieu and in light of what's happened in recent weeks? And so it was his idea. We all jumped on board and certainly were able to execute and get to that point. And now we have other NBA teams following suit, but particularly in the state of Georgia, where voter suppression has been such a problem. But that kind of leadership, that kind of vision, we're lucky. We're lucky and grateful and thankful to have a guy like a Steve Koonin who, is not afraid to buck the norm, if you will.
I want to definitely follow up on that, because we have a lot of research at the Sports Innovation Lab that focuses on what we call athlete-driven media. And that is the fact that athletes today have a lot of tools that you didn't have when you played, right? Instagram wasn't around, TikTok wasn't around. Now we're really dating ourselves. But the idea that these guys can actually go out and be very vocal about not only business of sport, but these causes and the social issues that are going on right now. How did you do that as a player? And can you kind of go back in time and be like, if I had these platforms, do you think you would have been vocal? Do you think you would have played that game? It's not playing a game, but do you think you would have been one of those guys who stuck their neck out and really made some strong points about where you felt things were heading?
Yeah, those are great questions. I'm mindful in 1994 when I graduated from Duke and entered the draft and sort of started to assemble my team, of advisors, lawyers, agents, so on and so forth. Someone said that, hey, you have the opportunity to be a brand. And I didn't quite understand what that meant, as I knew what a brand meant, but it just in terms of as an individual sort of understanding that you could be a brand. And so, it was very different back then. And maybe it's a good thing that social media wasn't around back in the 90s. But I think in terms of being able to, a couple of things. One, technology has allowed us to share and exchange information. And so if I lived and played in Detroit, I might not know what's going on in Toledo, Ohio, although Toledo is very close. And if I put the time and effort, I could certainly learn about some of the troubles that were occurring. But it was harder to access information at that time. And so now it's so easy. And I knew it was a turning point. I think it was in 2010, or maybe it was 2012. I should know this. But when it was announced that we found and ultimately, killed Osama bin Laden after he had been in hiding for so long. And I saw it on Twitter. And this was the kind of news I can recall growing up, where you're sitting at the kitchen table and Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw.
And they say, where were you when this happened, right?
Yeah. So, now I'm sitting in bed with my daughter, watching TV, and I'm looking at Twitter and I see this announcement. And so that was really kind of eye-opening to me, sort of when that happened. And so the ability to access information is one thing. And then two, because we talk about brands, we all are a brand. We all are accustomed to being on. We're all accustomed to talking to our network, as Scott talked about earlier, or whether it's 5 people or it's 5 million people. And so I think this younger generation of players, they're accustomed to being on, and there's no filter. I don't have to call up Scott and pitch him on an idea
much to my chagrin.
I still call Scott, but now I can speak directly to my audience and really, go to the entire world. And so I think young players today, young athletes in all sports, are more cognizant of their brand value and their audience, and are more willing to speak up. And I think technology and social media has played a huge role in that. and shouldn't be, it should be noted in that regard.
And it will play a huge role in the growth of the league from here on out, whether you're talking OTT. I mean, this is, as Thomas Friedman said, it's a flat world, and you have great ability to scale whatever it is you're trying to disseminate because of technology. What was your thinking? And I chuckle at this looking back, the big controversy when David Stern said he wanted to put a camera, just a still camera, on the wall in the locker room at halftime. I remember the uproar among players. How can we do this? And yet, it's exactly, you talked about access to information. It really does fuel what today's fan wants, and that's just purely access.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think back growing up in suburban, Virginia, D.C., and as a fan of basketball, and you were starving for information. And you had the USA Today. You might have a publication, a sporting news, or Sports Illustrated, and that was it. And so, but you were just so hungry for anything and everything about your favorite player, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, so on and so forth. And now, where there's information and access is so readily available. It's interesting sort of how we evolved in that way. And to that point, I remember it was so invasive. Like, hold up, this is our sanctuary. This is our private space. You're going to put a camera in there? Like we can't, how are we going to be able to be ourselves? And how are we, all these sort of things that sort of went through our mind at that time, all these concerns. But that's what it is. It's people want content. They want something that provides another layer of access. And I think, obviously social media provides that. I think the league and the NBA in particular has probably embraced that more than any other league. The interviews with coaches during the game, that seemed, just wrong and maybe reckless and just, and now it's a part, like we look forward to that as a consumer, as a fan. I want to hear what
absolutely. And it's a perfect segue to the idea of an Ask Me Anything, because you've provided yourself to this audience, right? They're here, they're asking a ton of questions. So this is going to feel a little bit more like speed round than logical kind of flow of thought. Grant, but you got a lot of people out there that want to ask you questions because you've allowed them access to you. So let me jump in. The first one is really from Buddy, who wants to know, and I'll summarize it real quickly, with revenues and debt sort of piling up for the league, sort of how does that change the way that you guys think about where you're going to invest and what you're going to do next, and taking more risks as an investment group?
Well, and sorry, this question is direct. You said towards the league. I just want to make sure.
So no, it's more of a question of like there's declines in potential revenues, right? And
no question.
Yeah. So with that and the distribution of those revenues, how does that impact sort of the way that you think about investing or new business and ventures? Your level of risk, I would imagine, is sort of at the core of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think as it relates to the NBA. Obviously, every industry has been impacted in some form or fashion during COVID. And certainly, although we were able to recoup some revenue having the restart and crowning a champion this summer, it's still lost revenue. And I think, different teams, different organizations are impacted differently. I think I saw the World Series champion Dodgers, maybe lost $125 million this year having a season. And so, we are all sort of impacted. And the challenge going ahead for us is how do you budget? How do you prepare for a season that there's so much uncertainty, moving ahead? And so there's been all this talk about what's in store and, what next season looks like, when it's going to start. Spectators.
Well, what's sort of the persona of your ownership group? Are you guys the ones that sort of are like, hey, this is a time where because of the situation, we're going to do a land grab, we're going to try to reinvest, we're going to go hard? Or are you looking at the numbers and going, okay, look, this is not the time to do that. Let's continue to see how the tea leaves sort of play out here?
Well, we're in a good position, and not to dive into those details, but we've already sort of begun the process of redeveloping downtown Atlanta. And so, we have moved forward with that. We've partnered with CIM, and Tony Ressler, some of our partners. We're bullish on creating an experience in downtown Atlanta. Downtown Atlanta, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there's sort of that area.
I know there's a lot of roads named Peachtree.
Yes. Yes. Everywhere you go, there's a peach tree for sure.
Yeah.
But no, we feel that it's, our duty as stewards of the franchise is to do everything we can to make Atlanta a great international city. And, there's so much booming development and excitement, but downtown has sort of been left behind. So we have a tremendous opportunity to create an atmosphere around our arena and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, similar to what you see out in LA with the Staples Center and
it's awesome. What's the coolest thing that'll be there for those of us who haven't visited or haven't seen the plans or don't know what you guys are up to? What's the coolest thing that's going to come around the arena?
Well, I actually think the coolest thing, and maybe I'm in the norm here, but I think from an architectural standpoint, it's hard to explain, but there's like a big hole in downtown Atlanta. And so the way we're going to sort of, fill in that hole with parking and levels and then sort of bring it to level with the buildings, from an architectural standpoint, that's cool. But there'll be some retail. We have to make some adjustments. We don't know what the impact will be with COVID, what that will be on office space, maybe more multifamily. So it's still very fluid, and it's something that's going to take quite some time. It's not it's going to be a 10-year project, but we're going to be pumping $3-4 billion into downtown Atlanta. And even in the midst of all of this, we feel we're going to come back in some form or fashion through this COVID environment. But we have an opportunity to help the city. I think it also creates an experience for our customers so that, you can come 2 hours early, you can stay 2 hours late. It'll be a live, work, play environment that I think Atlanta would enjoy and benefit from. And particularly this millennial generation, even some of the older baby boomers who want to be in a downtown core and want that sort of experience with quality of life. We have an opportunity to provide that. So yeah, I mean, we're moving forward. That's sort of separate and independent from the Hawks, but we're excited about that, and it will directly and indirectly impact and affect our business, we believe.
I'm glad, Grant, that you called them customers and not fans, because there have been decades where fans have been treated like cattle. Do you they would show up no matter what the product was on the floor and pay $5 for a Coke? What are you seeing out of the expectation of your customers? What's the return on investment, both in the emotional currency that they give you and the dollars out of their pockets?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, we look at them as customers, as partners, as members. I mean, they are an important part of who we are and what we aspire to be. One of the ways we judge ourselves in terms of how well we're doing, and these are discussions that Tony and I have all the time. But it's serving our customers, and that means a lot of different things. But it's putting a great quality, it's in-game entertainment, it's serving the community. But it's we're in the customer friendly business. We're in the service business. And so even in the midst of this COVID environment where there's so much uncertainty, we've done, daily, weekly wellness checks, as an organization, checking on our members, seeing how they are, not selling them anything, not really to update, but just continuing to nurture that relationship and using it as an opportunity to really continue to connect with our customers. As we reimagine our stadium, we had focus groups. We talked, what do they want? What do they envision this place being? And so making them feel vested in who we are. I hate the term owner for a number of different reasons. I like the word steward. We are stewards of this franchise. This franchise belongs to the city of Atlanta. It belongs to our customers. So we have to do everything, that we can possibly to serve them and make it the experience that they truly are proud of.
The Sports Innovation Lab has done so much work around the fluid fan that Josh talked about. What do you see in the younger sports fans of today? You have an 18-year-old, a 13-year-old. I have an 11-year-old. My kid doesn't want to go in an arena and sit there for 2.5, 3 hours. he wants to sit on his computer and watch maybe somebody playing Among Us. So how will you connect, whether it's technology, whether it's real estate, whether it's utilizing the players? What do you see as that next generation of fan and their desire? How do they want to touch the Atlanta Hawks in the NBA?
Yeah, and while you answer this question, touch on the fact that you're going to be a voice on 2K. I mean, that's pretty cool. Does that give you some cred with your kids? Not so much.
It did when I told them, but then it kind of went away. But no, yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's so real that this young generation is different. They don't have the attention span in some ways to sit for 2 hours and watch a sporting event. I think we've been very thoughtful and very intentional about incorporating technology. That's the digital currency for this young generation. I have an 18-year-old daughter and a 13-year-old, and I can't remember the last time they sat through and watched an entire sporting event. And they're athletes. I mean, they play sports. And so how do you keep them engaged? And so we have been good. I mean, we have been as an organization in terms of, our presence on social media, customer engagement, providing content, providing information in quick sound bites, which I think speaks to this younger generation. Really just, brand awareness, getting our brand out in the marketplace through technology. It's changing, it's evolving. And I think we have to remain flexible. We have to remain fluid, and we are. But look, the ratings are down right now. And a lot can be contributed to that. Maybe watching the NBA Finals in October is a little bit unusual for the casual basketball fan. Obviously we're in the midst of a global pandemic, which may contribute a little bit to that as well.
So some of this can be addressed by technology, right, Grant? Like creating different ways for fans to consume things. But Lawrence asked a question that I think is related to this, which is some of the innovation could be analog, meaning messing with the format of the game. So in the last decade, we've seen the emergence of 3x3, and it's now an Olympic sport, and the big three is out there. So Lawrence just wants to know, how much are you kind of paying attention to some of the stuff that either comes out of the international basketball community, or you just see as a really interesting opportunity to mess with the format, the length, the conditions of the sport itself?
Well, I'll be honest. I'm not as aware as what's happening internationally, but I do think that we are very much, it goes back to Coonan and sort of flirting with the idea of changing the start time to the NBA season permanently, or you can talk about some of the rules, and I know they're talking about doing a mid-season tournament. Last year at the All-Star game, we went to a new format in the fourth quarter to make it more competitive, and it was successful. And so,
and are you a traditionalist, or do you welcome these new ideas? You're like, no, the game should be the way that it is, so you can compare the guys from the 70s with the guys from,
It depends. I can go both ways. But, I think that exercise last year at the All-Star game was really interesting because on one hand, as a former player, I thought there was something wrong about us changing the format to make it more competitive. And so I was judgmental in that way. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's real. But it worked. And the new system, which I won't even attempt to try to explain, but I think we were all pleased as basketball fans. And I was on the call. I broadcast the game for TNT. It was fun. It got competitive. And it showed, first of all, that, competition is fun, particularly in all-star games, but it worked. And so I really had to applaud our leadership, for not being afraid, for, to try new things. In certain sports, I won't name those sports, but, Major League Baseball. But certain sports, I think, are stuck in tradition. And I think that really hinders their growth and their ability to connect. And so I love the fact that as a sport, we are global, whereas a sport like baseball, as great as it is, and I'm not a baseball fan, I didn't grow up playing baseball or really watching it, but it seems like it's really just a sport that's popular here in the United States, but it's a sport that's also very much stuck in tradition. And part of, we have loads of examples of businesses, of organizations, in numerous industries that were stuck in tradition and are no longer with us. And so
it's the classic definition of disruption, right? It's just, you can't get out of your own way.
No question. Look, I obviously I went to Duke, and I know Duke. People love Duke, hate Duke, but I'm going to talk about Duke. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is Coach K. And one of the things that really fascinates me about Coach K is here he is 73 years old, and he's still connecting, he's still resonating, he's still inspiring, he's still
very
teaching,
relevant. Yep.
He's still recruiting 16-year-olds. And 16, 17-year-old men from multiple generations, like the 80s, the 90s, current day, to be able to connect with them. He's a relationship coach.
He's got to be the coolest grandfather on the planet. I'm just assuming, I haven't met him, but he has to be the coolest grandfather on the planet.
I mean, when your nickname's the GOAT, I think it goes without saying, But I mean, I think, and it's funny, like every once in a while, he'll send me a text, and he'll say, I really like that post you had on Instagram. And like the fact that Coach K's on Instagram.
Now, wait a minute. No. Did he really see that himself, or did somebody point it out to him?
No. He has an account, and it's not under his name.
I'm going to look at TikTok right now to find out if I see that, I'm done.
If you see it,
Well, it's probably something. I mean, he's got an alias, I'm sure. But look, to be able to recruit and get to know and understand your players, you have to embrace that. You have to embrace technology. You have to embrace, and so I think he does it. It's one to stay connected to maybe his former players, but also to understand this new generation, what they're posting, what they're saying, how they're living. Like that's important to him as a leader. And so, it's a real valuable lesson I think we all can take, that you have to adapt and adjust. You have to evolve. You can't get stuck in tradition. And certainly I'll use my coach as an example of that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it, because there were a number of questions in here. Malcolm asked, how did Coach K influence your business and your post-career? And so I'm glad you were able to touch on that. Talk to me about the 2K decision and sort of your involvement in that. I picture you going into a sound studio and doing some additional color, but do they pull most of this stuff directly from your audio, from your analyst work?
No, we record everything, and so just so you know, so I was asked about it. It was presented to me for the new NBA 2K21 that'll be released at Christmas, and so really during COVID, during the pandemic, they sent it's quite amazing. They sent,
I can imagine.
They sent a whole, like a computer, microphone, a whole little, like a makeshift sound room that I have in my office. And I would sort of have my headphones on with my microphone.
Did it take days? Did it take weeks?
Oh, I probably recorded 100 hours. And so we probably did it over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a couple of hours every day. And every scenario you can imagine.
Do you drop some new sound bites for fans? Like, can you give us a little bit of visibility into some new catchphrases we might hear?
I mean, I need you or Scott to do something, like, make a basket or.
Oh, that's not going to happen on this end. Scott, you got to.
Time out when I don't have one.
Look at the time. We got to go.
All right. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there were some things because certainly you have a script, you have certain scenarios. They encourage you to ad lib, but you have to go through everything, like every possible thing. Foul trouble, somebody gets a technical, a game-winning shot, a buzzer beater, recapping the half, and teams shooting well, not shooting well. Like, and it was.
Isn't it the beauty of sports, though, that you cannot come up with every scenario? We all see things that we've never seen before.
And I think even with all of that time that we put in, like they may come back. There may be things throughout the season.
Sure.
Players are traded. So it's not like we're done. I mean, this is going to be a long relationship, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I don't know if there's going to be an announcement.
No, I hope it's
okay.
a long relationship.
Okay,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's ongoing, and so I to your point, Scott, I wouldn't be surprised at all if if in another week or two or what have you, they call me back and need a few things here and there, and that's part of the arrangement. But I think gaming is so important, and it's always been a part of our lives. But I'm just amazed and blown away by the quality of the
It
graphics.
really is. It really is
I mean,
incredible.
it looks real, and
You can't tell if it's a real game or a video game sometimes. You have to take a second or two. It's a video game.
100%.
well, to your point, and also you sometimes start to think how we present the game on television to our customers.
Right.
Do we start to make it look more like a video game?
We talked about this with Angela yesterday at a Sportico event, that in the future, the traditional leagues will be stealing way more, borrowing from esports and video games than the other way around.
Yes, no question. And I mean, even when you think about the bubble and you watch those games in the bubble, the way it was kind of presented and packaged. I mean, the camera angles.
Yeah, they had the rail cam. They had the stimulated crowd noise. I did want to ask you, did that mess with the way that you think you need to do your job?
In terms of
as an analyst, as a commentator, like is all that new technology when you start going to games, right? And I'm not just talking about the bubble, but the bubble did accelerate a bunch of new things that the NBA wanted to try from a production standpoint. Do you look at all that stuff and go, hey man, when next time I'm on the sidelines and I'm trying to do my job, like there's new things I got to be ready to like kind of roll with here, because I didn't know that they had a camera that did that, or I didn't know they were going to shoot that angle.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember when I first started broadcasting games, I didn't know, like you're sitting on the floor, and I didn't know if I should look at the game or look at the monitor. And so, you're learning. You don't know any of this. And so you kind of throw yourself out there and you go at it. But, for the most part, I'm watching the game. Like I'm watching what's happening on the court and all the bells and whistles and camera angles. And that's really magnified for me, or has been, at the Final Four. The Final Four, there's cameras everywhere. And so, our director and all the people in the truck are just, they're excited. Like it's just all the bells and whistles, and they can have fun with how they package and present it. But as a broadcaster, you're watching the game, you're explaining the game, you're inserting and injecting humor when appropriate, but you're trying to create this nice listen. And that's subjective. And certainly easier when you have Bill Raftery next to you. But, that's so you don't get caught up in all of that. But sometimes, yes, embracing certain things and, coming out of timeouts, replaying certain plays, you might have different angles you're not accustomed to. But all of that is all for the audience at home. But
remember, Grant, like what we're seeing and what we're going to see even further in the future is the technology delivering an optionality to the customer. If I don't want to watch Raftery and Hill, I can watch the game cast with the coaches, or the game cast with the band leader, or who knows what. We will forget broadcasting. There will be narrowcasting. I can watch it the way I want to watch it. That's a good thing.
It's a good thing, and we've already kind of done that a little bit. We're providing. I mean, I know I'm obviously in the NBA, but on the NCAA side now, for those Final Four teams, there'll be a Virginia UVA broadcast or a Duke broadcast, and so and I think we're leaning more and more towards that, and we have to. I think back, like I said, back in the '80s when you watch television. I'm old enough to remember when there was only a few stations, and at a certain time at night, the broadcast would just go off. And now there's so many options available to you. So we are, as consumers, I think that's how we live. That's what we're comfortable with. And we have to provide that even in terms of how we present and package these games. And so I think you can see more and more of that, Scott.
Let me ask you this, Grant, because I've always used Cameron as an example of such a unique game experience that the demographic, 18 to 21-year-old, that should be on the phone the entire time is riveted to the action. Is that still the case at Cameron, where all these, I use kids even though I'm older, all these kids who should be on Instagram and Facebook, they are still captivated by what's going on in front of them? And is that a scenario you can recreate in a professional setting?
That's a great question. And, I was present at the last basketball game in Cameron right before the shutdown, and it was March 7th. Duke beat North Carolina. We blew them out, which is always a good thing. But, I'm always mesmerized when I go back to Cameron. And sometimes I'm in awe that, like, wow, I really had the opportunity to play in this place. And it's still, I don't want to say traditional, but there's still something pure about Cameron. But one of the things, to your point, that I noticed, yes, everybody's fully absorbed in the game. The Dukies, all these, Gen Zers, they're painted and they're crazy. And, I find myself watching them sometimes more than I'm actually watching the game. But one thing I did notice, and certainly Cameron looks the same, like, nothing's changed. It looks the same. And maybe just a new coat of painting, but it's all like this sort of old school field house, very intimate, everybody on top of each other. But one thing I noticed and I observed the last time I was there is that now they pipe music in during timeouts. And it used to be the band and the crowd was just going crazy back in the early 90s. But now it's like a party. And so like during timeouts and stoppages of play, there's constantly something. There's something to keep everyone engaged. There's never a downtime. It's a little bit like an NBA game. You go to an NBA game and the in-game entertainment, the big heavy guys out there dancing with their shirts off, or the lady with the cups, and she's there's always something going on to stimulate you, and there's never really a downtime. And so I noticed that even in Cameron, that like I was more exhausted leaving out of there because it's like a party and the kids are dancing and they're playing like Lil Jon and all these sort of relevant new songs, and so it's almost more fun to watch during a timeout than it is during the game. And so that was one of the changes that I observed. But it is in some ways refreshing that Cameron is still old school, still sort of, it's all about basketball, acting crazy, having fun, and cheering on your team. And those kids are, when the ball's in the air, they are 100% absorbed in the action.
Well, Grant, we try not to keep our guests more than 45 minutes just out of respect of your time and everything else. So we're getting close to the end here. I did want to ask you about A Beautiful Thing. It's the movie that you're an executive producer with Dwyane Wade on. It's an amazing story. Can you talk a little bit about why you got involved with that production and what the movie's about for our audience so that they can check it out? I think it's on Peacock, correct?
Yeah, it's on Peacock. It'll also be on Amazon soon. And thank you, Josh, for mentioning that and giving me a chance. So long story short, Mary Mazzio, the film producer, director, I've known her for 20 years. She approached me about 2.5 years ago with this story. And she basically said, look, there's this book that this gentleman wrote about his time in high school. And it's about his experience on an inner city all-black rowing team. And that in and of itself, like I was like, whoa, like repeat yourself, like that makes no sense. I mean, here's this sport that's, elitist, it's Northeastern, it's definitely not a black sport, if you will. And so anyway, I signed on. I trusted her as a filmmaker. She's an award-winning filmmaker. And we began and are still on this journey where we were able to highlight a lot of things. First of all, the trauma that these young men faced in the 90s, just going to and from school and growing up in these communities where, you rival gangs and just all of that they experienced. And but this sport brought them together, and it gave them some values. It gave them purpose. It was healing in a way when you're on that boat and you're away from all the noise. And this team never won anything, never won a championship. They didn't go on and star in college, but it really gave them a real foundation for success and purpose. And there's some beautiful moments in the story as this team gets back together 20 years later. And one of the gentlemen is R. Cooper, who wrote a book called Sugar Water about his experience. He basically thought it was a great idea to invite law enforcement in Chicago to train and get in the boat with the team. And a lot of these young men had very bad experiences, like a lot of black men in inner cities with law enforcement. And he just felt a couple of things like, if he could get these police officers to know their names, then they would not have to say my name. And he also felt that as a student, you remember teachers. Teachers don't always necessarily remember their students, but a student will remember an impactful teacher. So let these young men teach these law enforcement officers how to row. And so it was just really powerful to see how like the apprehension at first and like uncertainty on both sides, and how these two sides became teammates and got in the boat and worked together.
It's the power of sport, man. And I heard you talk about it before. It's the power of sport. It's part of why we're doing these AMAs, so that we can get together with people that understand that fundamentally. It's about, I heard you say this before. It's about like they used to pause wars to have the Olympics, right? It's like it is that moment, right? It's the idea that we can actually bring together people in a different format and a different way to have these conversations and build those relationships. Scott, is there anything that you want to add before we let Grant drop the mic?
Only that if you liked what we just did, and I can't imagine folks did not, Grant, you'll be glad to know we're going to do this again, the Sportico tie-up with the Sports Innovation Lab on November 19th. And our guest will be Jason Wright, the president of the Washington football team. If you have not listened to Jason or don't know what he's about, I can tell you, you want to listen to his conversations. He's a really astute guy. I'm excited that we've got him.
Awesome. And Grant, the tradition on my AMAs, and hopefully now with Scott as well, is we give our guests the last word. So is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, this is great. I just want to say thank you to both of you, and I love what you're doing, and I'm honored to have been a part of it, and I look forward.
Number one, man, you were the first guest.
You know what? I'm humbled. I'm humbled, and
we are as well, Grant. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm gonna tune in, even though I'm a Cowboy fan. I'm going to tune in and watch your talk next week with Jason Wright.
That sounds awesome. You can ask him anything.
I will.
All right. Be good, Grant. Take care.
Thank you, Grant.
Scott, we'll see you.